Welcome to Journey to Justice. I'm Eiko Kusasa, your host for today. A month ago, I interviewed Patrick Uchigakiuchi, a psychologist and researcher at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. He has worked for years on community issues like substance abuse and family relationships. Currently, he participates in a project at the Women's Community Corrections Center under the leadership of Warden Kawika Patterson, who considers the facilities a place of healing or refuge, a pu'uhonua. I began the interview by asking Patrick to share where he was born and raised.
Okay, I'm an Aiea boy, born and raised in Aiea. And this was when Aiea was still a plantation town. We had the sugar mill in Aiea.
Are you a sansei, like third generation?
Yeah, third generation. My dad's from Waipahu. My mom's from Punaluu. And actually my dad's family, he worked on the plantation for about half their life, and then his dad was sort of an entrepreneur. And my mom was, her dad was a farmer, lived way back up in a valley, farmed taro mostly.
Can you say a little bit where you went to school?
Went to school in Aiea until until high school. Then I went to Mid-Pacific Institute. My mom graduated from Mid-Pac, and so she, was very encouraging, and I was very happy to go to Mid-Pac.
Because?
Aiea was kind of a rough place in those days, and it was good for me to change. I thought it was gave me a chance to be something different again, instead of being the same person.
Yeah.
So Mid-Pac was a good thing for me.
Yeah. Okay. Can you tell us how you came to political consciousness?
I've been thinking about that, and
Yeah.
I think Puanani Burgess, we work with on our current project, she has when she talks to the women, she says, well, we're really talking about getting to where we would like to go.
And who are the women? Just so it's clarified.
We have a project at the Women's Community Correctional Center. And so when we're talking about strategic thinking, when she's talking about that with the women, she says, some people, if you're trying to go from here to here, it's a straight line and they're very focused and directed. Some people are what she calls more creative, and they take sort of a, maybe a more roundabout path. And then there's the people who kind of go, this kind of way and finally end up to where they would like to be. And that's sort of my story. How I got to that point is kind of a Malcolm Gladwell type of story of, serendipity, tipping points in my life, and sort of having a feeling of what was important to me, but not having a specific goal or project or ending point, but just kind of feeling my way through and feeling, am I on the right track? Does it feel like something that is important for me to do? And it's always, I don't know why, it's always something about, unequal treatment that people receive, or unfair or lack of opportunities that are not available, that hopefully everybody should have available to them, and just try to create a equal playing field. And for my area, it's actually mental health, and that we have a lot of disparities in who has access to good treatment, to effective treatment, to treatments that's consistent with their own values and beliefs. And so I've sort of been feeling my way through. And
are there any moments though, like experiences or something that made you turn a little bit more?
My first one, I guess, when I was about 10, I think, we took a family trip to the mainland. And we did a day trip, like in those days, everybody went to Tijuana. And to see people living under the bridge in cardboard houses was just a total shock to me, because my whole, everybody lives in a house, and to see people not have a house was shocking. You know, that you know, there was that condition in the world.
Yeah.
And that was my first. And then my second was in college when I was at University of Illinois, and I did volunteer tutoring, and it was to schools that really needed kind of extra help for their students. And and it was, of course, many of the students were African American, and I worked with this little girl. She was about, I think, in the second grade, and so just talking story with her really made me appreciate the importance of people who could do work with them and provide opportunities that they might not otherwise have. And so that's how early in my career, I really worked I was a teacher, elementary school teacher. I'd say those early on were things that really shaped just that experience, that there are inequalities and people don't always have the same opportunities.
So what was it like? Sort of like, so through your life, you're trying to position yourself and to try and help, like mitigate the inequalities.
That really, just for me, an issue of fairness.
Yeah.
You know, and unfair or lack of opportunities that everyone really should have. I did different things. You know, Neighborhood Justice Center, when they were first forming, Peter Adler and Dave Chandler was really amazing experience.
What is that Neighborhood Justice?
They started as a conflict resolution program that was generated from the community, you know, to solve community level problems. And they did everything from water rights, early conflicts with water rights, to what I worked in, which was custody issues, that parents who were getting divorced and couldn't agree on who was going to have legal legal and physical custody of the children.
Right.
And we did volunteer mediation. They were referred to Neighborhood Justice Center by family court, and we did family mediation with them. And then the other thing that was sort of related to that was through my dad's experience, we got connected with Hospice Hawai'i and this amazing person, Mitsaoki. And so I did volunteer work for Hospice Hawai'i, and at that time there was AIDS was just a really terrible problem, and so Hospice was working. They were primary one working with people with AIDS. When
you're saying you're doing volunteer work, what were you doing?
With Hospice, it would be respite care. You know, we were not nurses or trained physicians. We provided respite to the primary caregivers.
One of the things I noticed, you were teaching at Chaminade, and then I remember once we had this conversation, and I think it was in the supermarket. You told me on how you were giving that up, right? Because you want to do this other work. So what made you, because it was a secure job, right? You went from a place that, where you had a job to like, this is more like soft money, right?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That, to me, that's it's not a risk, but it's a definite choice.
Yeah.
That other people are not going to make that choice.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's one of those things along the path.
Yeah.
As long as I felt like I was on the right track. I'm not the type to plan my life. 20 years ahead. As long as I felt like I was on the right track and doing the right thing, that things would work out. It's sort of naive way of thinking, but
we ought to take more risks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I don't know if I'd say it was a risk. It was just kind of the right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like building up, like you were saying, from when you were this kid and seeing the people under the bridge and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it goes all around, but it's still the same trajectory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to talk about what you're doing now with in the prison issues and stuff?
Okay. Even that was sort of a kind of a serendipity, or just being at the right place at the right time. We were the evaluators for the State of Hawaii Mental Health Transformation Grant, and they decided to include in their initiative implementing trauma-informed care into our health system, mental health system. And we were looking at different places, different state agencies that would be interested in looking at that type of program, implementing that type of program. One of the people on the advisory board for the mental health grant was a representative from public safety, Department of Public Safety, and he invited us to visit his facilities. And it was at the women's facility with Warden Mark Patterson that really you could see he was very interested. He had started on his own mission to create a place of healing at the women's facility, and he had started developing programs there. And when we talked to him about implementing a trauma-informed care, that just resonated with him, because his experience with the women was that over 75%, 75 to 80% at least, were in the prison specifically because of their early trauma history, early and chronic history throughout their development, and then into adolescence and into early adulthood.
Wait, when you say trauma, what do you mean?
Well, many forms, right? For the women in the prison, it was really focused on interpersonal violence, domestic violence, you know, being physically, sexually abused by their partners. And for a particular group, you know, Native Hawaiians overrepresented in our prison system, that historical trauma is an important part of that, that many of them are probably more vulnerable to being in that type of situation.
Right.
And so Warden Patterson really saw that trauma-informed care, and how to incorporate that into what he was doing in terms of a place of healing, create a place of healing, made a lot of sense for the women that he was working with. And so that's how we started to talk more and more about how we could do that. And we're trying to be as systematic as possible in how we're implementing that step by step, which really involved having people from the community. There are many people who are really committed to reforming our criminal justice system, and many who are really focused on this issue about the pathway. How did they get into prison? You know, how did the women end up there? You know? And there is a very common pathway of early trauma, interpersonal violence in the family, contributing to conduct problems, academic failure, substance abuse, sort of as a self-medication for the kinds of pain that they're feeling. And then involvement in the juvenile justice system, involvement with people who manipulated, and involvement then in the adult criminal justice system. And that's a very common pathway for the women, men as well.
Right. So when you're saying there is, so how is this, if you're trying, I mean, what part of your work are you trying to address? Like if there's a pathway and...
Yeah, so the warden has his formula. 50% in the facility or in the department, that we develop programs within the department, within the Women's Community Correctional Center, to work toward their own healing. And then the other 50% is in the community. There's such a high rate of recidivism because when they do good work in a prison and they go out, there's not continuity of care to follow through on the work that's being done in the prison. You know, employment is a problem, housing, loss of family connections, and they end up in the same place and coming back. And so we also are developing programs in the community through transitional programs, and then out in the community in terms of education, job training, and peer support groups. And that's the kind of more holistic approach that we're taking.
But I know at one time you were saying you have like a group discussion thing that you're a part of with women. And can you talk about that?
Okay.
I don't know what it does.
Well, within a facility, or within an agency, when we talk about trauma-informed care, number one, the assumption is that everyone who's there has some history of trauma. And in a women's facility, 100%, we documented that, it's 100%. They have some kind of early trauma history.
Right.
And so one aspect of it is training. Everybody gets trained, from the administration to health, mental health, to the adult correctional officers, cooking staff, that the whole organization is trained to understand that it's very possible that difficult behaviors that are being displayed by the inmates can be triggered when they re-experience some early trauma experience.
Right.
And so you respond to that in a different way, in what we say is a trauma-informed way. And so we do training. The other part is to create programs for the women that are trauma-informed, meaning that whatever it is, substance abuse treatment, whether it's a total life recovery, which is a faith-based approach to recovery, that they also have some understanding of trauma, the effects of trauma, and that they make sure that in the way that they interact with the women, they're very careful to avoid re-triggering, or if there is something that comes up, many times inadvertently, that they really understand the best ways to work with the women at that point, so they're not continued in their re-traumatization. And so the part that we're implementing now is this assessment part, to really have a good understanding of their history, so that we can better develop our programs to meet their particular needs. And I think the most significant part of that is we developed a group of women to really advise us on what would be the best ways to implement this type of trauma assessment and trauma treatment planning. And the women said, don't even ask us about that kind of stuff when we first come in. Which is normally when, as a mental health person, you do screening, right? And you do an assessment. You ask, what happened to you? You tell me all of the times you were abused and mistreated. And they said, you ask us that in the beginning, might not tell you the truth. We're just coming down from our addiction. We still got to see the judge. We don't know who's going to get that information. We don't even know who you are. Why should we tell you things like that? We don't even tell our closest friends or family about what happened to us. So, and we were trying to implement and be consistent with the Warden's vision of for him it's a pu'uhonua, place of healing.
Yeah.
And learning how to live a forgiven life. Because when they come if they make it to the pu'uhonua, they are forgiven. But now they need to learn how to live a forgiven life, to be able to go back to the community and the family that they came from. And so for us to do that kind of typical mental health trauma screening and assessment is really not consistent with a place of healing, because they get re-traumatized when we start to ask them about their history. And so we wanted this trauma assessment and trauma programming to be the first thing that they experience as part of healing, the first steps as part of their healing. And so the women said, look, we need to know, first of all, what's happening in this place, because the women get manipulated by the people already in there.
Yeah.
And so, and then they said, and then we got to know who you are. We're not going to tell you anything unless we know who you are, and that we feel safe and we trust you. And so what they taught us was, the first thing we needed to do was they said it's called the HOW workshop, Healing Opportunities workshop. You know, what is this place offer? What kind of programs? How do I access the programs? And how does it work here? How do I call my family, you know, when I'm inside the prison? You got to have phone privileges, you know. How do I mail out letters? You know, all these kinds of practical things that help them make a successful adaptation and not get manipulated and used.
Yeah, I didn't think about you know, you could go into prison, you don't even know how it's structured, you don't know what the heck's going on.
Exactly. And they said, that was totally traumatizing. And to get in there, they're getting yelled at, and it's a very bad experience.
Yeah.
So we do that first. And then they said, you know, don't even talk to us for 2 months. You know, we're just getting used to this place. But so the second thing we did was Puanani Burgess brought in her Building a Beloved Community training, you know, workshop. And it involves, you know, it is, I'm just amazed at the process. It works very quickly to building a sense of safety and trust. And in trauma-informed care, even in therapy, that is the first stage of recovery, is you need to have a feeling, a place of safety. And you need to be able to trust, you know, somebody who's going to help you or be working with you. And so we did 2 workshops on different activities that Puanani taught us and taught the women. And we developed the peers, their own peers in the prison who gave these workshops. It's not us who's doing these workshops, it's the women who are in there, who are committed to giving back and helping others in their recovery. And so they run the HOW workshop, you know, what happens here, you know, how do you really get around here? And they do the Building a Beloved Community. They create the safety and trust. But we also participate, not as therapists or clinicians or somebody at a different level, but we sit in and we participate just like everybody else. And we share our own personal information just like everybody else. And so they get to know us in a different way.
Yeah.
And so.
But how has that changed you? Because, you know, especially you're trained to, like you're saying, you're going to ask these questions, and then they're saying you're doing the wrong thing.
No kidding, we're doing the wrong thing. You know, I tell you, it just, you know, it forced me to really think through, you know, what am I doing? You know, and you know, the one thing we all are good at is learning. We just, you know, human beings, we just built to learn, and so that's what I had to do again. You know, is to really learn from the women, you know, what works for them, and so it's a really a really good interaction of learning from each other. You know, what would be helpful to them, what we can provide in terms of support, and different ways to think about themselves. A lot of times, because of their early experiences, the ways that they've developed to adapt, you know, it might work in that type of situation, but now they're trying to integrate themselves back into the community, and they need to adapt again to a different kind, with different ways of thinking, especially about themselves and how they impact other people. So it's really, you know, we've had to, but for myself, I've really had to change the way that I think. Maybe that's not the right way to phrase that. I did have to change the way the way I approached. But it also made me better at what I do, which is to develop programs that can be utilized by others in different settings. So, for example, we're now going to start working at Waiava with the Waiava Community Correctional Center, and working with the men there, because men also have significant histories of trauma. in different ways from women. So, but it was the process. It helped me to understand the process of how do you develop effective programs. You need people from different disciplines to work as a team, and I think that's what I enjoy so much about the project at the women's facility, is because we have people from different backgrounds who are all working together. Toni Bissen, she's the executive director of Pu'a Foundation, but also very active. She is really like a project director for these programs. And Toni always says, everybody has got something that they bring to the luau. Everybody has their own gifts, and that's really true. And we all appreciate what each of us brings. We all do better work.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to add before we, end this interview? Something it could be even a topic we didn't get into or anything.
Working with 3 people on this project at the women's, Puanani Burgess, Toni Bissen, and Kawika Patterson, the warden. It for me personally has been a tremendous experience. I feel really fortunate. And it's probably not by coincidence that they're all Hawaiian, but there's something, they're just really good people to work with, for one thing.
Right.
Very committed. And in the end, we all feel it's really not about us. I mean, I think that's the part that really then comes through, is that, by us all working together, in the end, it really is about the women and their families, and the community that they are trying to go back to live a forgiven life, learn how to live a forgiven life, which actually in many ways all of us are kind of, we all have our own imperfections, and so I learned actually as much as the women, but really is, working with those 3 has been really an amazing experience for me. It's I feel it's really changed me in an amazing way, and I just feel fortunate that I have an opportunity to work with them.